Good morning. Welcome to this wonderful Wednesday morning, February 21st. We are meeting for the Finance Committee. I don't have any opening comments, and the super is on her way. I would like to ask for an approval of the agenda.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. And next, approval of the minutes. All in favor? Thank you. Our first item to discuss would be the calendar for our budget. We've already been discussing it this morning a little bit on some of the dates that were going to be a little sticky. I'm going to have Ms. Cooley talk a little bit, and then we'll discuss some of the changes we've already figured out need to be made.
I'm not sure if they need to, the calendar is up here, but there it's showing now. Yes, this is our proposed 2024-2025 budget calendar for this year. And I just wanted to make sure everybody was okay with these dates. We did have some changes, one this morning on May 15th. Instead of having the board public hearing at 6 p.m., we were going to do it at 11 a.m. right after the Finance Advisory Committee meeting. That was one change that was made. And I also wanted to note the big thing on here that I wanted to make sure everybody was okay with. Juneteenth falls on our typical adoption of our budget, which is June 19th. And since that is a holiday, we cannot meet. So I put it on a Thursday, and I just need to get some feedback. Is that okay? Is everybody okay with it being June 20th, which is a Thursday, because June 19th is the Juneteenth holiday?
Any discussion for board members on that? I will have to call in, but I've already told the budget people. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Cooley. If you have any other thoughts on this calendar, please get with Ms. Cooley or myself after the meeting. Moving forward, Ms. Cooley, we put you on the back burner from last meeting, so if you would like to enlighten us on our favorite three letters, QBE.
Thank you. Okay, this morning I'm going to talk about the Quality Basic Education, or QBE, or full-time equivalent students. And this brought back some memories, because about 20 years ago, I was the FTE coordinator for the school district. And so when I was looking back over this, it is unbelievable how little has changed since that time. It's pretty much the same other than the money amounts. And it was, it was something I enjoyed back then, so it was nice to get back and talk about QBE a little bit. Okay, we're going to take a closer look at it. And please feel free during the presentation to stop and ask questions, because this is kind of more for information and learning. So if you have any questions while I'm going through it, please don't hesitate to stop me and ask them. Quality Basic Education. It was enacted back in 1985 by the Georgia General Assembly. And as I was stating earlier, very little has changed from that time. There are essentially educational funding for each grade, kindergarten through 12th. Pre-K is not funded through QBE. It's funded through Bright from the Start. The state uses a formula based on full-time equivalent students, and it's also based on what programs those students are taking. The enrollment is very important to the state funding for our school districts, so that's why when enrollment is going down, that means our state funding generally follows. Each program has a cost, and programs are weighted to the actual cost of the particular type of program. Waivers. Our district, there are maximum class sizes and minimum expenditure levels, but our district does have, we operate on a strategic waiver school system, which means that we have flexibility in the form of waivers of certain state laws, rules, and guidelines in exchange for greater accountability for increased student performance. If we didn't have that waiver, we would have to spend the money exactly in the area earned. So with the waiver, we have ways that we can spend the money maybe in another area if our district deems that would be better for the students. Components of the QBE formula, full-time equivalent students. Student counts are held the first Tuesday in October and the first Thursday in March. And the way that we are funded is really based on about an average of 3 counts because it goes back to the prior year also. A typical FTE is 6 segments of the school day, which are the classes. There are 19 state-funded categories, and a specific weight is assigned to each of those categories. It's extremely important to our district and to any school district that they make sure that FTE is counted accurately. If it is not, this is millions of dollars that could be lost to the school district. So they have to be very careful and make sure that the students' classes that they're taking on those particular days are counted accurately, and that we count every student. Yes, ma'am.
So if a student is absent on that Tuesday, but they've been in school every other day before then, they still are not counted? Is
They
that
are
correct?
counted. Their rule is, if I remember correctly, as long as you have been in school at least one day in the past 10 days, and,
Okay.
okay, did I say it right? I wanted to, that was remembering back from my 20 years plus, but yeah, as long as they have been here prior, one day within the past
Okay.
10 days prior, we can count them.
Okay, good.
And that they haven't not enrolled,
seemed a
you
lot.
know, if
Yeah.
they take them out,
Yeah.
obviously, we don't count the student if their parent came, if they were here like 2
Right.
days before the count, but they said, I'm leaving, I'm
Right.
going to this school, we would not count them.
Okay, thank you.
On this slide, we show what the direct instructional costs are. When you look at the FTE allotment sheet, which I have on a later slide in here, and many of you have already seen, at the top of the FTE chart is our direct instructional cost. And this is for like salaries and benefits for teachers, paraprofessionals, subject specialists, counselors, technology specialists, as well as for their direct instructional costs, which would be like their textbooks, consumable materials, travel, equipment, that sort of thing. They're non-salary and salary costs that are direct instructional or at the top of the, when you look at the allotment sheet from the state. At the bottom half of the allotment sheet as a state, you see the indirect instructional cost, which includes funds for central administration, school administration, facility maintenance and operations, our 20 days of additional instruction, which is tutoring for students outside of the classroom day, and media specialist and salary and benefits for operational cost. A traditional schedule is made up of 6 segments a day, which would be like taking 6 different classes. For example, high school, if you took English, math, science, that could be a segment a day. Now, our school district, there are other ways to also count on these count days. As I said, the first Tuesday in October and the first Thursday in March. But with ours, like for example, our high school uses block scheduling. So if you look at this under the non-traditional block schedule, you will see that segments, they take the 4 block segments, but for the first count in October, they take the 5th and 6th segment is your lowest and highest weights on the day before the count. So they look at the first Tuesday, they would look at the Monday before that, what the highest and lowest count day is to get their 5th and 6th segment, since we don't do a traditional 6-segment day in high school. And on the third count, they take the 4 block segments on that Thursday, and then they do the lowest and highest weights on the day of the count day. So for the 5th and 6th segment, they then take whatever your lowest weighted program is and your highest weighted program and put it in for 5th and 6th. It is kind of complicated.
And this is why we teach calculus.
This is why they do it on purpose, so they can say that's your number.
programs and program weights. As we've stated, QBE is a weighted formula that's based on students in each program, and it's directly related to the cost of providing the service for the program. Now, on here, I wanted to give you kind of the weight that it started out with. This year's base weight is $3,022.45. That is for a student, one student all day that is in grades 9 through 12 classes. If that would be a very least that they would pay for a student that's here all day and is taking legitimate classes would be $3,022.45. Well, what they do with, the state determines which classes, I guess, cost more to educate. So they give higher amounts of weight to things that maybe have to have a smaller class size or more expensive materials for the class. So like, for example, kindergarten has a weight of 1.6831. Grades 1 through 3 has a weight of 1.2997. And middle school carries a weight of 1.1415. Grades 9 through 12, as stated at the top, carries that 1.0 weight. Yes.
So we get the least amount of money to fund high school where we do some of the most technical teaching in our CTAE program.
Well, as you'll see on here, and I'll show you, you get more money if you're taking a CTAE class. So that is a higher weight because that is more expensive. This would just be what they considered like a non-gifted. Gifted gets more, for example, but like if you were taking a regular English class, you would only get like the base type for that particular, but it's based on 6 segments. So you can have base on like 3 of them, but you might get a little more from like if they're taking a gifted class or a remedial ed or a CTAE class. And on this next slide, oh, sure.
I'm sorry, quick question on slide 12. As it relates to I think the kindergartners, what
Yes, sir.
type of variables are considered to make that weight? Like, for example, can you give me a
The
name?
state does not tell us exactly, but we do know kindergartners have paraprofessionals, and that money is kind of figured into that higher weight. It's not just for the teacher, for example. It's also figured in. Also, I would imagine kindergartners they require a lot of consumable items that are very expensive. Like you have to have a lot of paper, construction paper, crayons, things that you may not have to have in the consumable products. So the state doesn't exactly say how they come up with their weights. They do change them year to year. The weight does not, like this weight may change year to year. Now, it's not generally a huge amount, but the weight can go up as well as that base amount changes each year. So like the base amount, that's one of the few things that I noticed from 20 plus years ago that I used to do this that has changed is they did change obviously the base amount because it costs more to educate a child today than it did 20 years ago, as well as the weights. If they see something, I guess, costs more, it needs different things, the state has they can go and change it and add more weight to that if they're saying, oh, well, there's not enough money going to this particular program. It's gotten more expensive over time. They can increase the weight of it, as well as our base changes year to year.
Michael?
I'm noticing on here, there's nothing about 4th and 5th grade.
I just put this one on more for an example, and there is a weight for every little thing that is on that allotment sheet. And if you need me to, I can also send you the weights for each one that they have. They're out on Godot's website, but I can send you those if you want to know what each weight is for every single program we have. I just was trying to kind of show some examples on some of these slides, but there is a separate weight for each particular one. I just pulled out a few.
Okay.
And this is just to kind of give you a rough overview of how they come up with it. You take your FTE weight times the number of FTE that are reported. And on the allotment sheet, it's not just for one count, it's like over 3 counts. So I will tell you, if you are losing students, it's actually helpful to you because it goes back And it takes a while for you to have the total loss because it's based on a 3-year average when they go back and do it. It's a very complicated equation, but I do have it because when I used to do FTE, I talked to one of the state people, and before they retired, they gave me their equation. So I've been able to kind of figure it out before we get our allotment sheet sometimes for certain areas. But when you are gaining students, like if you're a school that's growing, you're actually behind on being allotted because they still go back behind. So FTE helps districts that are losing students actually as opposed to districts that are growing because it's slow to catch up, but it's also slow to lose. So we have been on a downward. So it's actually been beneficial to us because we've been losing approximately, well, this year we lost 427 students, but before that it was around 100 or so we were losing a year. So it actually is to our benefit that it's slow to lose. But if suddenly we get bigger, it's going to take longer for it to catch up the funding. So you take the FTE weight times the number of FTE times the base amount to get your allotment. And on this slide, I did an example of a grades 1 through 3, a very simple example. The weight for grades 1 through 3 is 1.2997 times, I took 100. Obviously, our school district is much higher than that, but I was trying to take a simple number. And then take the base amount of that $3,022.45. And if you multiply that all together, you come up with the allotment of $392,827.83. That's a very simplistic form of how to come up with it. Now, that is not taking into account the past, that's one particular FTE count. They figure in more, they figure in the one from last year and that sort of thing, and then you have 2 counts this year, so it's always kind of behind. We also have on the FTE allotment sheet, and you will see it when we show an example on the screen, training and experience. And this formula, what it is what they do is they look at schools and they have an amount, because most of our teachers are very experienced, so we do get extra money for training and experience because it's based on a T4 with 0 years. In order to compensate for districts that have higher than that, they give us a T&E amount to add to the allotment sheet. And this information is done by HR when they submit the CPI, and that's when they submit all of our teachers and all of their certifications. They also report people that are on our health insurance because that is also on the allotment sheet, a money amount for that. So when you look at this with the CPI, that is where we get our training and experience number, which is also another number. And here is the allotment sheet. I know this is very small, but that is exactly the size you get of it. It is in the Godot website. It is on the Godot website. If anybody wants one, actually the one I send is a small, the way they have it printed. You have to go on the Godot website, and it's open to anyone. It's not just like a password protected, so any person can go in and pull. And the way we fund, we wait for this initial one to come out. Like right now, while I'm doing the budget, and when you get your preliminary budget, it's going to be based on projections of what I think we're going to get back from what we're going to get from the state. But until they give it to us, which is usually end of May, beginning of June, which gets put on the adopted budget, I can then put in the exact amounts of the revenue. Right now, I have to look at what we have now, then I look at things that are going to be changing, and that's how I come up with the new local revenue. For example, one thing that is on the legislature that is a big cost that's coming in is they have proposed to raise health insurance once again. We got the big raise from last year that's already for the classified being implemented the next 3 years. And I have contacted my state contact to see, should I go ahead and budget for this, and they recommend it. They can't tell you it's going to be for sure until it's actually voted in August or September by a board. But right now, usually the health insurance does go in, and they are raising health insurance is going up a total for the classified next year, and this was something we didn't know, but is on the legislature, a total of $2,160 more for each certified person. So the total that it's going to be next year, just for health insurance for certified, is $21,120. Right now, it's 18,000 something. So it's going up another 2,160, as well as we will also have to absorb that for the classified. They're not going to stick it in the classified yet because they're already on that where they move it up on January 1st. But we will be on January 1st, 2027, they will tack that additional amount onto the classified. So we're going to be seeing raises going in through 2027. So January 1st, 2027 is when they'll put that last bit that they're adding to classified next year to doing to certified next year to the classified in 2027. And we were already increasing each year for classified based on what they did to the certified last year. I know that's kind of
So is that like 8 to 13.5 million over the next 2 years?
It is, when I did a projection, let me see what I came up with. I don't want to say, all right, I came up with, and this is based on preliminary, and I took our FTE off this, and see, they only pay for health insurance for certified, not for classified. So I'm hoping we will get, but as everyone knows from the sheets we've passed out, we fund over 2,000 positions that the state doesn't fund. So, and that's a lot of teachers too. A lot of certified are mixed in with that over 2,000. So out of it, I have that the certified additional money is going to cost us next year, and this is not going to cost us directly, but it's going to be a total of $5,566,320. But when I figured in how much the state is going to pay for that, they're going to cover all the ones that are on this FTE sheet that are certified. They're going to cover those. It's just those above allotment teachers and the teachers that we have which are above, and all the certified that's above that, that they won't cover. So it will not cost us quite that, because I also figured in that the amount that we already know about that's going up for the classified next year is going to cost us, in comparison to this year, $4,941,000 for the classified employees that are on health insurance. So I'm showing, I did put in my projection the amount based on the FTE for this, so it brings it down a good bit from that 5.5 million for the certified. It cuts it, but not completely, because we have a lot of teachers that are above allotment and are not funded by the state. And we also have a little bit smaller class size than maximum in many cases, you know.
Just a side comment on budgeting. It might be helpful as we're looking at proposed and actual budgets, if we also have a side column or a separate document, here increased costs we know are coming over the next 3 years, either contractual, lease commitments.
I've got a
software
spreadsheet
stuff.
on that, and
Yeah.
I have put in numbers for it, so I have already,
Right.
started working on that, because I know we've got to know that, and it
Right.
is.
Just for information, at the next Finance Advisory Committee meeting, we're going to talk about the implications of all of the state changes, what it's going to cost us next year, and a part of that, we will try to include not only next year's cost, but the years after that, and I think that's what you're alluding to.
Yeah, if we know
Down the road.
next year we need another 14.7 million, well, we factor that into this year's budget decisions. And after that, we're going to need 12 million on top of the 14 next year. That has implications for millage rate discussions, for our rainy day fund, et cetera. So we already know what's out there. That helps us plan, that's all.
Correct.
Definitely.
Ms. Gabrowski and then Ms. Hall.
On the insurance, am I remembering correctly that last year we found out that the cost was going to increase substantially, but it was being kind of implemented more slowly. And is the state allocation going to fully cover the cost of that increase for the personnel that they cover? Or is there still a gap?
It does cover all those that are on this allotment sheet, and down here at the bottom, the health insurance number, right down here where they have the 58,924,313, that's your health insurance number right there.
Okay.
Just so you know, that's why, because it's like this sheet is kind of confusing. I kind of wanted to show y'all what each of the things means before we get off this slide, because it does take some, this is the way they've done it, though, since probably 1985. Ever since I've been doing it, the sheets have always looked like this, and they do include it in there. But it is supposed to be covering all of these FTEs, as you see at this top portion, the direct instruction, and anybody that's considered certified. Now, there are some downtown people that, like, for example, Mrs. Ball Oliver is a certified position, so she falls in the certified that they cover. But for example, my position is not considered certified budget director, so they do not cover my health insurance. So that is just examples of the way they do. And it has to be on here, like, for example, if you look here, the whole finance department, the only thing that the state pays for is one accountant. If you see that I'm trying to point to it on here, ACC.
Oh, yeah, we see it.
NT, that stands for accountant. They give one person for an accountant. So they cover, and I don't know exactly because it's all mixed in here, how much of that, it's all mixed in there. They might be giving $30,000 for an accountant. I don't know. I don't know. They don't give you these information. They just put it into a big total amount. And so if you can see our finance division, that is no way we could do for one person and one accountant. So that's kind of one of the things I want to answer everybody's questions, and then I'm going to kind of go through this sheet.
Just for information, on the right side of the spreadsheet, they, just like she mentioned, they give us the number of people that they fund, but that to fund one accountant, she's probably right, it's about maybe $35,000 for that one accountant. That's for that one accountant in the whole division of finance, whereas I have 52 people in the division of finance that we pay for locally. Same thing with campus police. The state doesn't pay for any campus police, and some of the other positions that's on that spreadsheet we gave you all. Those are the things that we pay for locally.
So that 30,000 is supposed to be for a CPA?
Whatever you want to call
Or
an
is it like,
accountant,
is it
it
like
doesn't
dental insurance,
specify.
where it's really just a coupon towards?
Basically, that's pretty much what it is. The same thing with transportation. I mean,
Yes.
basically, they kind of give us a coupon to help you out, but they really don't pay for the drivers or enough to operate the program. But that's one of the things, one of the problems we have with this funding formula that's, 40 years old or so. It's not, it's not good for large districts. It was designed for smaller school districts, but it's not big for larger districts.
Can I add something? It also does not include human resources at all, even though human resources is the entity that runs it.
Don't hire people. Teachers just show up. Ms. Hall? And then I have Mr. Moss and then Mr.
Where
Gabbard.
might we go to look for a comparison with the other 49 states where Georgia would rank? Where might that be found?
I would assume that it would be, I haven't looked at other states. I always look at other districts, and theirs are all listed where ours is. So you can look at other districts and see how much money they earn. But I haven't looked, but I would assume that they have something on their website for each state.
Or NSBA.
Which we're not, NSBA, we're not even allowed to participate in anymore, to, go to those conferences and find out what is going on. Georgia has always seemed to me, I've always looked at it with disdain, the amount of money they allow for education, but I'd like to be able to actually factually know. So if you find out where that information might be, I don't want to have to go to every 49 websites. So if you can find out somewhere where Georgia is compared to the rest of the nation in terms of because it's a moral, like we always say, the budget is a moral document, so we can see exactly where our thoughts are in the importance of the education of our children. I think that's something people need to know, and especially when we get to millage rate and we start arguing, that kind of thing can come up. Thank you.
I would check with the Association of School Business Officials, one of the national organizations, and I'll see if they have something that shows some type of comparison. It may not be every state, but it should be a good number of states.
Mr. Ross?
Thank you very much. Just for the general public, and I'm not asking for this today, but I think if the general public had a better idea of things like the fact that, they only budget for one accountant, but for instance, how, the formula for school counselors or social workers, that they're only budgeting one per 2,000 or 2,500 students. I mean, just absurdity. But if the general public, if we could get with the communications department and let the general public know, this is how much and how many the state budgets for, I think it would help a lot.
Great. And hopefully, I do want to kind of go through this, and it will show you some of those type of things. Is any more questions?
Mr. Katchmar, no, you're good? Okay, yeah, as you're going through it, I would love to have Mr. Ray at some point in time chime in on, does the T&E actually meet the needs? So you don't have to answer right now. We can let Ms. Cooley go through it. And then also, if you would discuss how QBE gives us earnings, but then immediately the state takes some of it back in that next column, and then the state funds is actually what we get. So please make sure you highlight that,
Exactly.
because it has always fascinated me. The state says, and here's how much you get, and immediately we're going to take back this much.
I have that pointed on my thing. That's why I wanted to kind of go through this, because to me, this sheet is how it is all in one page. So we'll start kind of at the top. This shows us this was our initial amendment. We get a midterm, which is what we do when we change it. We don't change our budget up until we have a midterm around April-ish. So this is what we start out with. In this first column where I was talking about direct instructional cost, you can see the various areas, and they all have their own weight that we were talking about early. Kindergarten program, kindergarten EIP, all down here. And as I think it was Dr. Bringman asked about CTAE. There's the CTAE 9 through 12 program. See, that shows you how many FTE have been reported from our district. 1,423. That's FTE equals 6 segments. So if you want to know how many periods, that's divided by 6 to get the number of maybe classes they took. That is, they take 6 segments equal 1 FTE. So on this first column, it has the direction instructions like we were talking about, and that's in the first half. And then you get a total direct instruction line. And then on the bottom half is the indirect costs, which is the stuff we talked about, like central office, school administration, F&E. And if you go across the way, this is where you can see earned positions that are all factored into the total. Superintendent 1, associate or assistant superintendents, we get 6. Principals 58, assistant principals 55.91, which is far less than we have. That's I don't even know if that would come to 1 per school. It certainly wouldn't for the alternative sites. Secretaries 68.69, accountant. This is a social worker, psychologist, special ed leader, media center. So that kind of shows you, and that's all figured into the indirect cost area. So, and then you get the QBE formula, and then all the things at the bottom, like Larry was saying, transportation for our entire transportation, bus drivers, bus monitors, buses, we get $3,310,483 from the state on a budget that's about 40 million? 32 million, excuse me. 32 million, we get a little over $3 million on a $32 million budget. So, you know, it certainly does, it's a drop in the bucket. And these are all the extra areas in here. Even we get a little bit of money for military counselors, 49,000. We do have an extra military counselors for those military students. Going across, FTE, this is the number of FTE we reported that they gave us for this year. And this is, like I said, you take this number and multiply it times 6 to get the number of segments, because an FTE is a total of 6 segments. This is the salary that they say that we get, and this is the operating cost, which this salary is for salary and benefits, then operating cost. And as we know, we do pay Social Security, and the state does not pay that. I did want to point that out because that is a definite benefit to our employees is Social Security. The fact that, you know, they pay Social Security, but we also pay half. You know, we pay 7.65%, and they do also, and they are eligible for Social Security. So that is in the salary. The operating is your non-salary items, and this is what Dr. Brinkman was bringing up, the QBE earnings. So you get a QBE earnings amount, which, as you can see, is it's over $275 million. But then they go and take out 5 mills. And the way that this 5 mills is you have to contribute at least, they say school districts must spend 5 mills to start with to participate in QBE. So in order to be in it, so you would have to at least do 5 mills, which obviously 65% of our budget approximately is made up of local money, and only about 34% from the state approximately. So we way in excess spend that. But as you can see, they go and take that off. They take the 5 mil share out, so it goes from over $275 million to $178 million is all the state gives us. So the only amount the state gives us is the state funds. So they don't fund the whole teacher, as you can see. They take it out of what they figure. So even for a teacher that is funded from the state that qualifies and has the amount, they still take out 5 mills, which you can see is not small amounts of money. It's almost $100 million. It's over $96 million. So as you can see, our state funds, not only do we have above allotment, that's why it is so important that we do have a healthy local economy and millage rate.
So the first 5 mills of our millage rate is making up for what the state said their formula would fund.
Yes. They said if you don't pay at least that, you can't get anything or participate in QBE. You must fund that amount, that 5 mil share, before you can even, that is the wording was school districts must spend 5 mil shares to participate in QBE.
Well, it would be nice if we used our 5 mil share, paid that, and they actually paid their full amount of the QBE formula rather than I'm fine paying the 5 mils to say, yes, we're a part of this, but that shouldn't come off of the top of their formula that they're wanting to say they're funding public education by. A quick Google search, Ms. Hall, we are 32nd on a quick Google search on per pupil spending. So, I mean, I don't know. There's a gazillion websites you can find, but we are nowhere near excellence, especially when we are told by the state, pay for some of what we told you was going to be your state funding. Please put that in the news, because it is ridiculous to say, here's the formula we came up with in 1985. Here's how much we're going to give you, but you have to pay this much of it.
Can we make sure that those comments are kind of amplified when we have this conversation about where we rank in terms of state academic performance? Because they're not unconnected. You know, so when we're talking in accountability meeting, when we're talking in academic excellence meeting, we should also be saying our level of investment, what we receive for this crucial work is not aligned with what our what our nation says is important. Because I do personally think that it's challenging for us to criticize our outcomes relative to other states, but we never talk about what our investment is and the supplement that we have to put forward.
Mr. Catchmark?
That is definitely one metric we need to look at when we're looking at budget and all of our other programming. Another metric we should look at, though, is investment per pupil. A lot of districts don't spend money on extracurricular is not the right word, but the multitude of things we spend money on because we try to offer differentiated instruction for each child. So we have many more programs where that family and that child can find their niche, find their passion for education, and graduate. And lots of districts focus on reading, writing, math, and that's it. No art, no music, limited PE, limited CTAE, limited rigor in terms of 13 AP. So they're also moral and policy decisions about what do we want to offer our kids. And if we offer a breadth of options, that means necessarily we're not investing in the core things that the state is testing us on all the time. So those are trade-offs as well. So the big picture investment in education is important, but I think we're higher in terms of investment per pupil. And then it's how do you actually make those policy decisions in terms of what are you going to offer kids. So I think we need a lot of data to help us make policy decisions.
Ms. Hall?
Yeah, I agree. We need a lot of data because as far as I'm concerned, if I offer you the chance to have music in third grade, that is going to affect your reading. And it is going to, it's all, you can't dislodge it. It's all coming into one. So yes, the data is necessary so that we can let the public know we've decided that it's important that music and PE and Girl Scouts, whatever we offer, we agree that that affects the outcome of that child's life and the outcome of their education. So I agree, wherever we can get this data from, Paige, we need.
Mr. Johnson, and then you keep going, Ms. Cooley.
All right, so we're talking about data. One thing that I would also like for us to consider is not just where we rank nationally, as how much the state spends per pupil, with 32nd according to what the quick Google search said, but I also would like to see where do we rank amongst the highest districts in the country, as well as the highest states and with their outcomes with student achievement as well. Because I think that's to me, for student achievement, that is what we're trying to aim for, is the top end student achievement. So where are those states and those districts? What are they doing budgetary wise? Because you can have someone who is spending, a lot more per student, but their outcomes are not as high as even ours.
I'd be glad to see where that ever.
And that's what I'm saying. I don't know if there's a correlation or not, but I would like to see the data represented on outcomes as well.
I don't understand what you're asking for. So you're saying are you saying a programmatic comparison to the top performing schools? Because if the rank of the investment, if we're 39, 32, Lord. If we're 32, then we already know the level of allocation for the top performing districts because they're all going to be there in those numbers. So are you asking for the programmatic comparison of how they're using their money?
What I'm saying, I'm saying is like, if we're spending at number 32, and say like number 7, and they're spending in their allocation, but their outcomes are not as good as ours. That's what I would like to see.
Oh, so you want a rank of outcomes and allocations?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Catchmark.
Yeah, another point on the data, it's the spending, but really it's the people who are initiating what we're doing with the money that really matters, leadership matters. And I would encourage all of us, go look at that accounting report we got last board meeting. It tells us in there what our spending per pupil is, right? And our spending per pupil is much higher than the state's spending per pupil. And if you really want to start thinking about actually substantive outcomes from what we're spending in the top 10 nationally in terms of spending per pupil. So it's really, what are we doing with the money and who's implementing it and where are we having success and where are we not? So
Are you counting ESSER, though? Because we got a lot of ESSER money based on free and reduced lunch students, and so we got $99 million just from ARP, which is much higher than others if you're looking at our spending. But if you look at general fund to general fund, that's what I would think would be a more accurate.
Here's what I'm saying, Mark Twain, my favorite quote, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics, right? One number in our annual audit report says, here is our spending per pupil. When I got on the board, it was like 8,900, and it was like 10 or 11,000. Then it was 12, and now it's much higher than that. And look, I found something on Google too. Here's top-rated states and what they spend per pupil. Many of these states are in the mid-20s or high 20s. But I would suggest go look at the number in that report and compare just on a broad basis what states spend and outcomes, and you're going to start wondering, okay, how are they getting to these numbers? So we need to be careful about our data, but at the end of the day, not lose sight of the fact that it's the people implementing what we're spending the money on that matters as much. We got to have the resources, but then we have to implement it. You can't just, that old cliche, you can't just throw money at it. You need to actually invest wisely. That's all.
Another thing I would like to know, too, if that number included eSplosh, because that is not, that's just to build a building, so
It's
I
in
don't
the
know.
audit report that we got last month. I'm not going to say what the number is because I don't want to misspeak, but it's a pretty high number.
Okay.
And when we're on the data discussion, and if we're going to talk about quotes, I'll use one from the superintendent about data doesn't lie, but it doesn't tell the whole truth either, especially when we start to look at numbers at the state level. Because one of the things that we've talked about in the past with our legislative delegation is the idea of an opportunity weight within the QBE, which is not there now. But we all know that when we have districts like ours with higher poverty rates, there are additional services that we provide as a district, which adds substantial cost. And even though we get some of that money back through our QBE, it's nowhere near what we're spending. So I think we also have to, that's just another layer of the onion that we have to be thinking about. So I think all these data points are helpful. I just don't want us to get so caught up in numbers that we're not taking that nuanced look, which I think is what Mr. Katchmar is saying too, is like we need to be nuanced in the way that we're utilizing this data and not oversimplify a very complex conversation.
Dr. Hoskins-Brown?
Thank you. Just for logistical sake, this is a really good piece of information that somebody may want to dig into. Can we start, at least for this one, put a hyperlink on the presentation that will be in board docs so people can go to it, or put a QR code on it so people can connect to it and look at it?
Sure, we can make that happen. We also have another document that we have on the website that's just more understanding QBE funding from the state. It's about 20 pages. So we'll make sure that we'll make sure this is added too. But we do have another document on the website that goes into a little more detail about the funding. We just try to summarize it here.
Okay.
Ms. Cooley?
And to kind of finish this off, we've gotten to the state funding column. As you can see, the teacher column is what we earned in teachers based on the FTE that was reported under the teacher column. And the subject specialists are under the next column. And then counselors, which I believe was mentioned by Mr. Moss earlier, you can see that we earned 78.2 counselors, and then tech specialists. as well as all these earned positions that we talked about under the indirect cost. One more thing I wanted to mention on here is besides the health insurance that's down, here's our T&E at the bottom. We get an extra, a little over $100 million for our T&E because we do have quite a few experienced teachers, thank goodness. So that adds $100 million to the amount, and it's put down at this bottom figure right here. That's figured into it.
And part of that is the health insurance, though, correct? So
Health insurance is the one next to it that's a 58. But now they are shown separated out here, but they technically, the revenue is, when we put the revenue in, it's all in through here.
Yes, all.
And can I ask Mr. Ray, could you tell us if that amount that the state is giving us pays for the state mandated step increases, correct? Don't let me talk incorrectly, for training and experience. Does that funding actually, or are we having occasionally to meet a gap, even on state-funded positions?
I think I'll defer to Mr. Jackson on that.
The state, for the teachers, certificated teachers on the sheet, the state would give us the funding for their step increase up to, I believe the state stops at 20 years, Mr. Ray, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken?
that's true.
Whereas we go up to 25. So there's a portion of even the certificated staff the state doesn't pay for our more experienced teachers.
Okay, so
And-
we're on pause for a second so we hear that loud and clear. The state has a step that we
Maximum.
follow.
Correct.
And
This
here's
is
where you get a raise, this many years, this is where you bump up your classification and stuff like that. And the state formula stops at 20 years. So any teacher after 20 years, by state funding, would just get the same salary unless we do, as a board, some local increase, correct?
Correct.
And we, as a board, have already decided to increase and make our own steps up to 25, correct?
26.
26, okay. But the state thinks that after 20 years, a teacher shouldn't get paid any more because that's the max of their experience. Can't get any more experience, don't really want them to get paid more for those last 10, 20. I mean, we've got teachers that put in 45 years in the district. They're going to get paid the same amount by the state unless the board says they're worthy of more funding, correct? The state could care less.
Yeah,
Okay.
You would think they would tie their scale to match the TRS, teacher requirement years of 30 years.
Makes sense, correct.
Can I add one more thing? As a part of the state salary schedule, remember that's for every district can follow that state salary schedule or not. We, as one of the metropolitan areas, don't, because we use that schedule, but we have a local supplement. So we're adding in more money to be competitive on each one of those levels. And so that money we do not get back because that is just our contribution to understanding that we need to be competitive against the other districts. And so that all of that local supplement that you'll see in our salary schedule, none of that we get back, and that is just totally funded by us.
Yeah, because QBE doesn't take into account what your cost of living or where
Correct.
you are. You're just a school system in Georgia, and this is the number for every school system in Georgia. Okay, yeah.
And I would give up, when we were trying to look at we went to, I think, Millen, Georgia, I think that's where we went to. We're looking at another multi-campus. That number that you see with the one superintendent and the 6 associates and the one account, that was a school district we started. It was like one school, the whole school was the whole school district. That's what they had.
That's all.
Since we have the news here, I think we need to understand that this board, over the last 10 years, has made these things happen. We have had an exemplary board that has decided we're going to do these things despite what the state is doing. And that needs to be addressed and realized that we have an exemplary board and we need to be really proud of it.
Do you have anything else, Ms. Cooley?
I wanted to just say one comment. You were asking about steps. Just to give everybody in the district one step, it cost us about $5 million just for one step each year. just to kind of give you an idea of how much one step is costing if you put it together. And I think we've kind of talked about there. Midterm adjustment, I kind of brought up. That's when we come in and we make the adjustments if we go up. We don't take away, if the state does not penalize us if we do not go up. I mean, if we go down, they don't penalize us at midterm. They don't penalize us till the next year by reducing it. So we don't lose any during the school year, but the following year you will lose. And then I think if there's,
We've had the question. Yes, Mr. Catchmark.
Just one comment, since this is all part of bigger budget planning. 84% of our budget is people, or whatever it is, but that's typical for most. If we want to stay ahead of the accelerating teacher shortage locally in the state and nationally, most people are swayed by more money. Others are more altruistic, but the vast majority, if we pay them more, that might sway a decision. So my view is we need to get out ahead of that, have a goal of being in the top 5% or 10% in the state to keep attracting and retaining people here. And we need to plan for that over the next 3, 5, and 10-year budgets, not just short-term based on what the state's going to allocate this year. So our thinking should be maybe we want to set a goal of being no less than X percent every year. Then we figure out what the state's doing and what we're going to get from our millage rate and work backwards into that. If the policy goal is retention and recruitment, we should maybe set the goal differently.
I will second Mr. Catchmark's comment. So in our budget hearings that are going to start showing up here, I do believe that the vast majority of the board wants to see those strategic markers hit, and one of those is retention and making sure that we attract and retain great teachers. I know we're coming up on the hour mark. I'm guessing everybody has lots of things to do, so I'm gonna punt you, Mr. Jackson. But if we can, yeah, we'll do general fund and fund balance, and then I think if we could add that to next month's agenda and with the ESSER and the things that Dr. Watts wanted to discuss on things that we funded that we know are going to not be funded anymore through ESSER or CARES, that we are either going to just stop or we're going to have to find money in the incoming budget. It looked like you had something you wanted to add, Mr. Ettinger, or no? You were good?
Well, I just want to confirm, if you're closing up, if we could have a review of the budget calendar this meeting as a priority item.
We already did.
We already did that.
already
We did that. That was the first thing we did.
at the beginning
Oh,
of the
did you
meeting.
hear that?
Yeah, you're okay.
Did I miss that?
I would like, and I'll get everybody, I would like to thank you for doing the QBE conversation with us. It will be nice to have this on our website where I can say, go watch this YouTube if you really want to. But also, it helps all of us as board members explain a very convoluted and difficult process to taxpayers. When I have never had a conversation with somebody about our budget where they're like, oh yeah, I fully understand that you pay for 2,000 employees just straight out of local taxes, or that the state rolls 5 mills right off the bat off of their formula, or wait a second, you're saying we're using something from 1985 and it is the same formula for every school district, rather if you're a rural area that has 1 building or a metro area that has 55 buildings, and that there is no money for HR and there's only one position funded for budget and finance. Being able to have those conversations gets people to understand that it takes lots of local money to make the school system work. And I would never want to see the post-apocalyptic view of if we didn't have local funding, what our school system would really look like. I don't even want you to present that because it would be so abysmal. But thank you for empowering us to help citizens, but if citizens watch this, it will also empower them to fully understand. And we need all those citizens to call their state representatives to say, please take a look at this. This isn't right if we want to make all of Georgia better. We're trying to move forward, but all of Georgia should be trying to move forward. And for a lot of districts, QBE hamstrings their ability to move forward. Ms. Grabowski?
I think I may have asked this question at the last meeting, so I apologize if it's repetitive. Do we know if there was a final report that came out of the Senate Study Committee for QBE last year that was headed by Senator Hickman?
I don't recall seeing a final report, and honestly, I think I mentioned this before. They have a subcommittee probably every 10 years.
Right.
And we never hear.
It's like every 2 or 3 years.
Right.
We've had 3 final reports, I think, recommending changes, and then it goes into the dustbin of history.
Can we at least inquire if there was a report that was generated from that study committee?
Yes, I can follow up and see.
And then, so that was a question, and then just a comment. Certainly appreciate keeping the meeting to an hour, but we may need to think, like, our next one, because we keep punting stuff to the next agenda for good reason, because this is a very healthy discussion, but we may have to look at least in this budget season, maybe these need to be a little longer. Not to, anyways, just, you know.
I will take that as a motion to make the next meeting longer.
Yeah. Yeah, because the next one, we need to talk about the state implications. We need to talk about some ESSER programs. There is a GNET special ed program that we need to talk about. That's a federal and state program. Another grant that's going away that we need to pick up the
Next month's meeting will be
tab.
longer. Everybody bring snacks.
And don't y'all want an enrollment? I usually do an enrollment too. I'm kind of working on that for you, so.
That's all.
Also, a status of the whole pre-K program. That's so essential to us, but that needs to be something the public is made aware of in detail also.
Thank you, everyone, and I do, like Mrs. Hall said, we do really appreciate your support, and we have had that for many years, and we do appreciate it, or we wouldn't have been able to do what we've done in our school district without your support. Thank you.
And we'll make sure we send out the link to that other QBE document that we have on the website, so you all can take a look at that one also.
Thank you. Madam Superintendent, did you have anything that you wanted to add today? Sounds great. She just takes notes, which is lovely. That's what we need her to do. And thank you, board members that aren't voting members on this committee, for showing up, because this is helping the superintendent guide where she wants to guide district staff in the markers that we want the budget directed towards. So again, thank you. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
And there we go. We're all in favor of adjourning.